everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Republican strategist and executive director of Principles First, Brittany Martinez. Brittany, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me back.
I would love to get your take on the major headlines both at home and abroad. Let's start internationally. The front page of the Jerusalem Post on Monday had a giant photo of President Trump, and it read, "God bless the peacemaker." On Time magazine, there was also a photo of President Trump on the cover, and it said his triumph. The world is applauding President Trump for brokering the peace deal between Israel and Hamas. For the first time since October 7th, 2023, all hostages have been released from Gaza. And as part of phase one of the peace deal, Palestinian detainees and prisoners, hundreds of them, have been released back to Gaza. The other phases of that peace deal remain to be seen, but what do you make of the moment that we're in right now?
I think that this is a win for America and a win for peace throughout the world. You know, I've been on this show several times and it's always great talking to you. And if anyone has ever caught my interview, you know that I'm a Republican who is fairly critical of the administration when I need to be. But I think that you also have to be able to call aces and spades. And this is good. What happened is good. Congratulations to the administration for their work on this. You know, this has been going on for over 2 years. And bringing home the Israeli hostages is something that we should all be able to celebrate.
To your point, this has been going on for over 2 years. The October 7th, 2023 attacks happened when President Biden was in fact in office. He tried brokering ceasefire agreements, peace deals. President Trump was able to get it across the finish line. Why do you think there was a difference here? What difference in negotiation or perhaps leadership styles led President Trump to have this result?
Well, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I do think that the Biden administration was able to help facilitate some of the hostages coming home, but obviously not all of them, obviously not this full ceasefire. Trump has a different negotiating tactic. I think that we have some good people in the administration that are probably also helping with the negotiations and that sort of thing. And this is something, you know, especially as Republicans, we like to say that Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. And so I think that he has a strong relationship with Bibi and this was a priority for him. And so I think that was all contributed to being able to get this across the finish line.
And like you said, this is a great day for the world. There's peace right now in the Middle East. President Trump said the war is over. He said that this was essentially a historic dawn in the region. He wants to see everlasting peace. What do you think his role is, and the United States is, and specifically President Trump's is, in sustaining that peace? What would you like to see?
Well, I think that everyone would like to see long-lasting peace, right? And I think that in this moment, you know, we should be celebrating, we should be grateful the hostages are home. But I think that we also have to be really honest about the situation. Hamas has been known to break ceasefires before, right? So I think that we can be optimistic, but cautiously optimistic, trust, but verify, sort of those adages that are tried and true, to make sure that we are not caught flat-footed in a situation where, you know, a terrorist or a well-known terrorist organization continues to do what a well-known terrorist organization has been known to do. With that being said, in this moment, I do think that we need to celebrate, but be mindful. I know I said that like 3 different ways, but I think we just need to hammer that point home. And as far as the president's role in a long-term capacity when it comes to this, you know, I think that the United States is a global superpower, obviously. And I'm an American, you're an American. That's what we like to think of ourselves as. And it's true. A lot of people look to us as a beacon of hope and democracy across the world. And so I think just making sure that his team is in place, the ones who are focused on the region and just being up to date on what's going on, I think that's important. And I think that it's going to be really relevant in the way we move and operate moving forward in the region, but also the way that our allies in the area do as well.
I do want to turn to the domestic news, and that is the government shutdown. We are very close to hitting the 2-week mark of this shutdown. Speaker Mike Johnson said that we're barreling toward one of the longest shutdowns in American history. As we can remember, back in President Trump's first term, we did see the longest government shutdown at 35 days. And as of right now, we aren't really seeing an end in sight here. It really seems like Democrats and Republicans are at an impasse. What do you make of this shutdown?
I mean, I never want to see the government shut down, right? That means that people are furloughed. That means that there are staffers on the Hill who aren't essential, who are sent home. People don't get their pay. And, maybe some inside baseball for folks watching this at home is that when you're a Capitol Hill staffer, and now my understanding is that it can be twice a month, but you get paid once a month. That's just the way that it works. I don't know why. I remember asking chiefs previously, but that's the way that it's done. And so my hope is that this is figured out by then for those staffers, of course, but also we have 750,000 or so federal employees who are at risk or who have lost their jobs in this moment. And I think it's terrible. I think Congress needs to come together and figure it out for the American people, and particularly when the president, I believe it was just last week, said, that and maybe he's retracted these comments or pivoted in these comments, but had said that for those who are furloughed, you're not going to be receiving back pay, and that's not what is traditionally done. And if that's the case, then I hope that no member of Congress or of the Senate or member of the administration gets their pay either, because what's fair is fair, and these people deserve to be paid.
And I have long conversations with members of Congress on this show. I'm really lucky that I don't have to worry about any commercial breaks. So when we talk about different issues with Republicans and Democrats, usually I can see some areas of agreement. Obviously, not the whole thing, but there usually is a Venn diagram of where Republicans and Democrats agree. And I think that's a really nice asset of my job, is that I can see these places where both parties agree, this bipartisan support. This is the first time I am not seeing that at all. There's a lot of daylight where Democrats are opposed to Republicans, and there's really no point of compromise here. Democrats are pointing the finger at Republicans, saying, we are here, we are in D.C., we want to negotiate on health care. Republicans in the House, at least, are saying, hey, we did our job. We passed the CR, this clean CR. Democrats have supported it before. And then Republicans in the Senate and Democrats in the Senate aren't budging either. However, as we know, Republicans have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, but they do need support from Democrats in the Senate on a vote in the CR. So, I mean, what do you make of that impasse?
I would agree with you. I think that in this moment, we have a very divided Congress, and politics is very divisive in general. And I can understand, and I'm not saying it's right, it's wrong, but I can see strategically why one party or the other party may not be willing to offer concessions or give in to some concessions. We're still a year away from midterms. If this was right around midterms, I think that maybe we would see people more quickly trying to figure this out. But because we are still a ways away, one, it gives each party the opportunity to blame the other party. And then two, it also gives the American people an opportunity to kind of forget that this shutdown happened, right? So if they're able to solve it by the end of October, they still have over a year until the next election. And we know that sort of with this 24/7 political cycle, news cycle, there's always something happening. And so a shutdown from a year ago feels like it was several years ago, right? And I think maybe there's some strategy there. I just want Congress to come together and work for the American people. And ultimately, I think what they're trying to do is just blame one another, when in fact it's Republicans who are in control of the House, the Senate, and the House, the Senate, and the White House, and Democrats. No disrespect to my Democrat friends and colleagues, but you don't have control of anything. And it's not that you're not also problematic in this moment, but it's Republicans who really have more of the resources. And so I hope that they are able to work with them hand in hand and get this across the finish line, because why else are you elected to represent the people? It's not for the easy stuff, it's for the hard stuff, it's for these moments, and they need to be negotiating with one another to do what's right.
To that point, I mean, Americans really do have a short memory when it comes to government shutdowns, especially. But I'm curious how political you think this moment is, and how stubborn you think politicians are being because they don't want to be seen as the weaker party. Because we remember what happened when then Speaker Kevin McCarthy compromised a little over 2 years ago. That's the reason he's then Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and there's a new speaker in town. Do you think Mike Johnson seeing that and maybe thinks that there's a lesson to be learned for his speakership role there? And then in the same turn, you see back in March what happened with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer when he switched around in the 11th hour and supported keeping the government open, and how his party really lost faith in him openly and his leadership. I mean, how much of that digging in the ground do you think that is based on those past events?
I actually think that perhaps it's Schumer who's taking the lessons learned from McCarthy's time as opposed to Johnson. Johnson is in a very different position in the House that McCarthy was. There, are different members of Congress who are no longer there, who were very actively a thorn in his side and were the ones who initiated his ousting, right? And so I think Johnson is in a safe position. I don't think that he's necessary. You should always be careful, but I don't think he's necessarily worrying about that aspect. But when it comes to Schumer, sure, not to mention that right now, Democrats still don't have a leader. I think it's very obvious. Is it Pelosi? Is it Jeffries? Is it Schumer? Is it going to be an AOC? Is it a Bernie Sanders? We've seen people throw their hats in the ring, like Cory Booker when he did his 24-hour speech on the Senate floor, but no one has really emerged as the leader. So sure, I can understand if perhaps subconscious, even if it's subconsciously, though I'm sure it's more conscious than that, if that is a thing that Schumer sort of kind of thinking about in the back of his head in order to keep his power.
I know that we were saying that Americans really have that short memory when it comes to government shutdowns, but recent polling does show that more Americans blame President Trump and Republicans for this shutdown. Do you think that really bodes well for the midterms?
So what we traditionally see is that the party that is not in the White House is the one that does better in the midterms. Now, I think that polling is really important and sort of indicates where the country is thinking, where they're headed. And, I said this earlier, it's really hard for Republicans, in my opinion. And listen, I've been a staffer for a long time, and I don't have to be the good little Republican staffer anymore who repeats the talking points. I get to say what I think, and what I think is that it's really hard for Republicans to make a case against Democrats when they're in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House. Now, if Democrats were in charge of one of the chambers or the White House, then I absolutely think that there's a case to be made. But you are the party in power. You said when you were going to be in power that you were going to fix everything, and the American people entrusted you to do that. And now you're not keeping the government funded. It is shut down, and you have to work with your colleagues across the aisle to make sure that our American families are protected. And in this moment, it does not look good for Republicans next year. Ultimately, though, I will say that despite the fact that that's my opinion, the party that is going to win the shutdown war is the party that's going to be doing better messaging. And whoever the American people ultimately think is at fault, today, that's what polling indicates. We'll see once this is all wrapped up and after the aftermath of the messaging, how Americans feel.
I want to talk about someone who's gotten a lot of attention for their recent comments, and that is Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Green. And usually she is in seeming complete lockstep with President Trump on a lot of issues, but she's saying that she doesn't think he's getting good advice in his ear when it comes to, oh, this shutdown's going to be good for Republicans when it comes to the midterms. She also said she doesn't, quote, think it's good advice that Republicans ignoring the health insurance crisis is going to be good for midterms, and added, I actually think that would be very bad for midterms. And she also said before that the number one issue she keeps hearing in her district comes to health care, comes to health insurance, those types of things. She also said it is absolutely shameful, disgusting, and traitorous that our laws and policies screw the American people so much that the government is shut down right now fighting over basic issues like this. What do you think of her commentary there, and especially when it comes to the health care costs that Democrats are raising the alarm about?
I can't believe I'm agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Green. I guess a broken clock is still right twice a day. I think she hit the nail on the head. And seeing some of these interviews, she's been extremely polished. She seems very stateswomanly, and I've known her, and I think maybe we've all known her, at least on television, right, to be a little chaotic. And so I'll give her kudos for that. I think that she's on the right side on this issue. And when it comes to healthcare, like, let me tell you, I'm a fairly young American, and I have had issues on and off with healthcare over the years. And I have no pre-existing conditions. Like I said, I'm healthy, and I can't imagine all of these Americans who are struggling with healthcare, not just the costs, but also even being able to get healthcare when it's only an open marketplace, during certain times of the year. So good for her. And I also think that she was very smart in the way that she approached it. In the beginning of that comment, you were talking about how she said that she thinks the president has people in his ear who are giving him bad advice, as opposed to blaming him directly. And so I think that is a good way for her to be able to go about it, because as we know, she's been sort of a tried and true Trump supporter. And in this way, she's able to still be that and say, like, hey, I'm kind of worried that he's getting bad advice, as opposed to, like, these are his decisions solely.
To your point, I mean, every American at some point, healthy or having pre-existing conditions, faces an issue with their health care, and you don't know how much or you don't realize how much it costs until you have an issue. I recently had an issue with my health care over a minor thing. I didn't even break my foot, had a minor issue, and suddenly that healthcare cost felt like an albatross. And Americans have felt that time and time again. Do you think, as you said earlier, whoever wins this shutdown is going to win based off messaging? Do you think Republicans should take a page out of Marjorie Taylor Green's book and start messaging her way as well?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but yes, maybe on this issue specifically, or the way that she has recently spoken about this issue. Now, I'm not saying everything, and maybe not this issue always, but I think that she's done a really good job about talking on this issue. And, it's not just a messenger. It's not just a message, it's the messenger. And she has been a surprisingly good messenger on this as of late, and I think that she's right. And maybe this is a turn for her, and the way that she legislates moving forward. But I do think that this is something that we're going to need to be talking more about. And personally, right, I always cared about healthcare, but unfortunately, sometimes it's not until you've had the lived experience yourself and you see the hurdles and the obstacles ahead of you that you really become passionate about an issue. So this is something that I personally become extremely passionate about. And I think that as people get older and they have experiences as well, they become more passionate about it too. And so I kind of see a change in that coming up, especially when we have some of the folks coming out in reducing the cost of prescriptions, like a Mark Cuban, and people who are sort of billionaires and doing this philanthropic thing. And so I think that we're going to continue talking about this issue.
And where do you see this shutdown ending? Because it seems now there's really no end in sight. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has said before that ending this shutdown would require President Trump to step in and push Speaker Johnson to negotiate, because without the president's involvement, Speaker Johnson and MAGA Republicans in the House are increasingly dug in. So how do you see this ending?
Yeah, I don't think he's wrong on that, to be honest with you. And we've seen Trump sort of have this really tough stance and then eventually cave in. We've seen him do that on tariffs. We've seen him do that many times on tariffs. Actually, it's incredibly volatile. We've seen him do that with TikTok. So I think that he cares a lot about his image. And the longer that this shutdown is happening, the angrier people are going to get. And especially if polling indicates that Americans are already blaming him and his administration, I do see him sort of coming to the negotiating table himself, or speaking to Johnson to get him to talk to Schumer more, or maybe be more willing to have some concessions. Ultimately, when it comes to Republicans are going to do what the president wants. So if that's what he ends up wanting, that's what's going to happen.
Well, I certainly appreciate the check-ins here, both on the Middle East conflict as well as this shutdown. And as we see major developments in both or either, I hope you come back on and join me. Brittany Martinez, I always appreciate our conversations. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.